Hello everyone, thank you for joining me for another Daggerheart Top 10 Domains list. This is going to be for level 3. I'll admit there's going to be no honorable mentions for this one. I'm uploading this video before I'm fully ready for it because the video I was going to be posting on Wednesday got flagged by YouTube because of some of the music I used. It's just because one of the royalty-free songs I use happens to sound like another song, so it's just unshareable for 48 hours. I'll be sharing my Dungeons & Dragons for a Youth game next Wednesday. It should be cleared up by then. It's fortunately never a actual strike against my account. So, with no further ado, please arm yourselves with pens and shield yourselves with graph paper as we gather around the campfire of our collective imaginations. We're starting with 10. Hypnotic Shimmer. Make a spellcast roll against any enemies in front of you within close range. On a success, once per short rest, you create an illusion of flashing colors and lights that can temporarily stun any enemies you succeed against, dealing them a stress and leaving them unable to move or act until stun is cleared. While in combat, the GM can't spend tokens from the action tracker to activate stunned creatures. This is Hypnotic Pattern. Just straight up, it's a level 3 spell. I like how the levels are 1-to-1, unlike in Dungeons & Dragons, and sort of not like in Pathfinder either. But this is once per short rest, which keeps me from putting it any higher. It's really powerful. Any enemies in front of you within close range, so it does have that in front of you limitation. It's more like as opposed to really like you throw down a pattern somewhere, you're shooting a cone of this hypnotic thing. The range also is not great. If it was a point somewhere else, again, it would be higher, but it should be easily possible once per short rest. The only resource spent here is the domain card itself, and then you can get it back next short rest. And there are also other ways to get back these renewable resources. So, solid spell, quite useful, limited just to combat. I suppose it could in theory have some social aspects or even exploration if you're keeping people from catching up with you. It's got a chance, so versatile. Number 9, Critical Inspiration. When you or an ally close to you rolls a critical success on an attack roll, whoever rolled the critical success may immediately clear a hit point or an additional stress. How sweet is that? In this game, you're going to be critically hitting pretty often. And this is only in combat, which is why I can't put it any higher, even though I tend to rate the combat things below better. You can heal or get rid of stress with this. So it is going to be whoever rolls it. If it was you or somebody else crits and they can give somebody else, there's like some limitations here that keep me from putting it higher, but it gets the 9 because you can heal allies and reward them for doing well. It does depend on the dice, but with giving each other advantage, maybe having other ways to fudge the dice a little bit, you could be critically hitting pretty often. And so I feel like you could just be, for no cost whatsoever, healing yourself thanks to an ally being near you. Also help support the front line. Number 8, Counterspell. Once per short rest, you can interrupt a spell or magical effect that has taken place to make a reaction roll using your spellcast trait. On a success, the spell or effect is immediately stopped and any consequences are avoided. I almost didn't put this up here, but it makes it number 8 because it doesn't just affect spells, but magical effects. That's pretty broad right there. And it's not necessarily something they kind of put Dispel Magic and Counterspell together in on this one, and this also comes up later for Codex at a higher level, but Arcana gets Counterspell earlier, and so it gets it right here. It's strong. I'd say maybe half of the enemies are going to be using some type of magical effect. It could even just be a weapon. It's using your reaction, but it's once per short rest. Then that short rest limitation, maybe if I was doing honorable mention this time, this would be an honorable mention because of that limitation there, but it still has a lot of potential. One, you want to keep in your pocket until something really critical happens, and then bam, you're going to try to stop it. Do everything you can to counter or dispel that. This could even be a campaign ending kind of effect because you're interrupting something that is taking place. That's my interpretation, that this also looks like a Dispel Magic kind of situation. So you should be careful with this one. and that's also why I think it's very good. That's only once per short rest. Number 7. Conviction. You speak with an unmatched power and grace. When you attempt to use this candor to de-escalate a violent situation or get someone to follow your lead, roll with advantage. Your conviction also emboldens you in moments of duress. When all of your stress is marked, your attacks are made with +1 proficiency. The first part, that's the full social thing right there. Just getting advantage on de-escalating violent situations, something as a hero you're likely to do very frequently. Getting someone to follow your lead, same thing. Very heroic thing to do, roll with advantage. It's not as niche as trying to work against somebody who has a bad opinion against you. You can use this against people who don't like you. You can use it with people who do like you. Just get the advantage, no cost right there. And then it kind of incentivizes you to fill your stress up, because then you become more dangerous. You do become vulnerable, makes you a lot more likely to get hit, but with armor, this is something else that you can kind of work with. Maybe your character's not afraid of getting hit. This is on Splendor, and so it could be on a Seraph, and that makes a lot of sense for your character to put themselves in harm's way. So solid 7. Number 6. The Book of Norai. Mystic Tether. Make a spellcast roll against a target within far range. On a success, they are temporarily restrained and mark a stress. If you target a flying creature, this brings them to the ground before restraining them. Fireball. Make a spellcast roll against a target within very far range. On a success, you throw a sphere of fire towards them that explodes upon impact. The target and all creatures very close to them must make a reaction roll. On a failure, they take d8 magic damage using your proficiency. On a success, they take half damage rounded up. So this is a few things layered in here. First of all, Mystic Tether means that you can just restrain people at will. Powerful, useful thing. It does say, again, a target, so you can restrain objects. And you might even argue that you could use this to keep objects in place. Because it specifically says target a flying creature, brings them to the ground, maybe you could use it to tether something or some kind of object to the ceiling in the middle of the air. Ask your GM about that. This game has a very fluid magic system to it, and so because of the soft nature of magic, you could maybe get creative with it like that. Of course, Fireball. Fireball. Can't be mad about having Fireball. It does require a attack roll against a target, incredible range, and then they're also going to be taking a reaction roll. So there are layers for the enemy. They are going to take damage no matter what, but it is actually not that incredible of a damage. It's only a d8 proficiency damage, but it is an area of effect fireball attack, huge range. Compare this to the ice spikes you get at much lower level. I think it only scales a little bit better than that is the idea. And really it's the combination of Mystic Tether, which is a solid debuff that you can use over and over again, and a fireball you can use at will. This isn't like you get 2 fireballs per day. You can just be throwing fireballs. It's so cool. This is mostly just a combat and exploration thing, but restraining your targets also has a social aspect because maybe you don't want to kill people. So it gives you another avenue through that. Number 5, Lean on Me. Once per long rest, when a character has failed at an action they were attempting, if you can spoil or inspire them, you both clear 2 stress. So here's where I say I wasn't really ready to release this video, and that's because this is when stress was tied to your hit points and the pool was a little bit smaller. So once per long rest, clearing essentially 4 stress is not as insanely good as it was before. I definitely would have put this lower on the list now knowing where I was, but I'm going to have to revisit this in the next version 1.4. That's where this is going to be updated and get revised. It's just a luck of the draw, I suppose, this time. So a bit of a wash on Lean on Me, but I hope you can see that in version 1.2, this did have a really good thing where you were essentially healing people as not even an action. You just console or inspire somebody, say to somebody, it's going to be okay, and then they get that stress back. Number 4, Invisibility. Make a spellcast roll while touching a creature. On a success, mark a stress, and the target becomes hidden for 1 hour until you cast a spell again, or until the target makes an attack or spellcast roll. It's invisibility. How wonderful is it to be invisible? We are limited by how hidden works in Daggerheart, but still pretty viable. So you can, for 1 hour, make one person invisible. This is a grace spell and not a midnight spell, somewhat surprisingly. So you're not going to be finding this on the sorcerer. That means that you're not going to have an easy time splitting it up into targeting multiple people because of their primal origin. They have that just like baked into the character for the meta magic. So invisibility, very easy spellcast rule. At level 3, why even make the spellcast rule 10 at all? It just seems trivial to a character at that point. To touch them, stress comes and goes, and then somebody's hidden for an hour. The combat options are here. The combat options here are pretty good for exploration. It's almost as good as a disguise, just having nobody notice you. And it is only limited by that target's attack or spellcast roll, just like with regular invisibility we're used to in most games. So invisibility is great, just fun to use. The only issue I really have with it is that you can only have it on one person at a time, so you're going to have to be pretty careful with that. But a 1 hour duration is immense, especially when you don't have to maintain concentration on it. Number 3, flight. Mark a stress to take flight for a number of minutes equal to your level. While flying, you may spend a hope to pick up and carry another creature approximately your size or smaller. You cannot carry more than one other creature at a time. Again, this was being reviewed before the changes to flight. This is as good as being one of the flying species like a fairy or being a winged seraph, but it's an arcana which is not limited to your ancestry. So being freely available to anybody at level 3, that's pretty good. Flight allows a lot of exploration. It's better than wall walking. It's better than being able to run, jump, and tumble to get to places. So good combat positioning, excellent exploration options, and just a little bit of social because you can get to talk to the people you want to, and you can carry one person with you. It does have that approximately your size or smaller, and so this again, it's just not as good on smaller characters. That's something that seems to come up a lot in Daggerheart, is that for spellcasters, generally, you're not going to have as much utility if your character is a smaller character, which I think is kind of interesting. That's just baked into the abilities that your character size matters. We haven't really seen something to control a character size outside of choosing your ancestry at that point. So flight, it's flight. You just mark a stress for a number of minutes. It's a very short duration, but it's something that you can still use for a good long while because it's equal to your level. So let's say 3 times 6 is 18, and then take your appropriate rests to get your stress back. Number 2, Towering Stalk. You conjure a thick, twisting stalk within close range that can be easily climbed. Its height can grow up to far range. When you conjure it, you may also mark a stress to use it as an attack. If you do, make a spellcast roll against any group of targets within close range. It erupts beneath any you're successful against, lifting them into the air and dropping them for 3d8 physical damage. This does a lot. You can conjure a thick stalk within close range that goes to far range. That just gives you a huge exploration capability right there. Who knows what a thick twisting stalk really does? Maybe you could use it with your basic druid ability, your wild touch, in order to grow some things off of it. There's some social aspect there. You could grow foods, maybe, beans, of course, are an obvious option. And then using it to mark a stress and do attack. At this level, your proficiency is probably only going to be 2. So 3d8 is great damage for the level at the cost of a stress, which is no longer tied to your hit points. And again, of course, this was rated before the stress changes. It was still really good. This is one of the best because of that versatility. You got strong combat option, good exploration, and then a little bit creativity with the sage domain right in there. It's just such a strong domain having this. Let's see, it's a close range spell that has a close range area of effect, which it comes up to like 30 to 60 feet of enemies being hurt. Like, it's a large amount of enemies getting injured if you're able to use it appropriately, and they get lifted into the air. So there's this like, a lot of flavor. It's cool. And of course, I like the fact, again, that you can climb it easily. There should be no roll required. Number 1, Book of Korvax. Levitation. Make a spellcast roll to temporarily lift and move a target you can see up into the air within close range of where it currently is. Recant. Use an action to spend a hope and make a target roll a reaction roll. On a failure, they forget the last minute of your conversation. Rune Circle. Use an action to mark a stress and create a temporary magical circle on the ground around you. Any creatures in melee range of the circle or who enter melee range of the circle take 2d12 magic damage and are pushed out at the end of their action. Let's start with Levitation. Classic telekinesis. So you might no longer need to have Mage Hand. This could give you an incentive to remove some of your lower level domains and use this instead. It is a close range, so the range isn't as good, but you can lift more and you no longer have to devote strength to your character. Again, it's a target, so this is combat. You can move a friend, you can move an enemy, you can move objects. It doesn't specify what you can lift with this. It just is a target. So maybe your game master is going to need to define what the spellcast target is, and then if you pass the difficulty, you can pick heavier things. I think that makes a lot of sense. And then it just goes into air in close range of where it currently is and move it around. Lots of fun. Let's see what happens if you drop it on somebody. Recant. You make somebody forget the last minute of your conversation. That's the social aspect right there. I think this is why bards get codex. They get weird little spells like this. Only costs a hope. It is a difficult reaction roll for your spellcast. 15 is not easy, but some of the first memory altering spells in here. I think you could use a lot of creativity in here. If you get somebody to confess something or they hear something they weren't supposed to hear, it maybe only has a very niche opportunity, but it is there. Rune Circle is highly defensive, but it's also a little bit offensive because you can use it to repel enemies and then hold the line. You just create that magical circle around you and then you're blasting out from the inside. So mixture like positioning, you create a position, you create a point to hold, and having 3 things in there is why these books, all the codex domains, are really good in my opinion, even better than the very versatile Sage domains so far. And of course, this is off of Demiplane, so I'm using the newest versions of these. Some of these were updated. I'd say many of these are updated even, but I'm still maintaining my top 10 list for this. I say Book of Korvax, best domain of level 3. Thank you for watching. I appreciate your patience. I look forward to sharing my second half of the D&D for Youths game next week, and I'll catch you online.